So this, as you may recognize, is a Corsair 1 mini PC that I used to do some case modding and a Star Wars theme build. This, as you might also recognize, says Corsair 1, but it's actually the Corsair 2 because it's the second one. But they wanted to kind of confuse you by keeping it the same name. Although it has all upgraded components with an RTX 3080, and I don't remember which CPU is in there actually. It's been a while. The first one was actually a 2080 Ti, which I ended up putting a RTX Titan RTX in there. But you know what? Temperatures and stuff on this have always been a little bit of a challenge because of the fact that it's got one exhaust fan on the top bringing all the air in through the sides, even though it's a fully water-cooled build. So go ahead and bring in the Corsair 3, actually known as the i500, but bigger, badder, and we're gonna take a look at it today. We're gonna tear it apart, we're gonna do some temperature tests, we're gonna see what happens when they add girth.
We interrupt this video to bring you a special message from iFixit. No, we interrupt this interruption with this interruption about new stuff from iFixit. We're sharing the graphics card, but inventory sucks. Fix the inventory problems with iFixit. Whoa, don't drop it. Can't fix that with iFixit. Just kidding, yes you can. Wish you could take iFixit with you anywhere, but your pockets aren't big enough? Introducing the new More
and the new Minnow.
Take them with you anywhere. So get iFixit for your loved ones, or just get them for yourself.
Also guys, I want to tell you about some new merch that is dropping. We have our extremely popular melting connector shirt with our vaporwave kind of retro colors. And you guys have asked for those colors to be back in our OG type of theme. So we listened and we answered. Right now available for pre-sale is the brand new melting connector shirt in our OG black and gray and red color. So if you guys want, head over there and pre-order those. They are going to sell out fast. Trust me, they're extremely popular. So without further ado, on to the video. All right, so this one, this came out in what, 2022, I think it is, the Corsair 1, the Corsair 2 one, the 1-2, whatever. It's actually, I really liked these builds because small form factors are tough, right? And this is a fully liquid cooled build. I'm not gonna take it apart right now on camera, but the sides open up. There's like basically 2 AIOs in there that are bespoke for this case. They're offered, it's part of the build from Corsair. You can't buy it off the shelf. It wouldn't work anyway because it has one exhaust fan on the top. That's a 140 millimeter fan that's pulling air through those radiators and forcing it out the top. So it's forcing fresh air in and exhausting out the top. The heat coming out the top is actually pretty significant. You can see the 3080 in there right now is running at 1710 megahertz, bouncing around between what, high 1600s, mid 1700s, depending on the scene. 72C, CPU's chilling at like 35, 38C, whatever, because the CPU is not doing anything in Port Royal. But 72C that's up there for a water-cooled GPU. But I've had this running now for like an hour because I wanted to fully heat soak it because we're gonna be temperature testing this one today because I'm curious as to what the thermals look like considering this has one 140 millimeter fan and this has 5 120 millimeter fans. So that's gonna be fun, but I'm not gonna open it up and mess with anything until after we get our tests because if I accidentally break something, that's gonna suck. So I guess I can just leave this one running for now. The specs though are pretty significant. So I said I can't remember which CPU's in this one. I guess I could look, but it doesn't matter. I think it's a 12th gen that's in here, 11th or 12th gen. 3080, which that's pretty warm in my opinion for a 3080 because of the fact that we're asking very tight amount of hardware to be cooled by just having one fan pull air through there. Even the graphics card is pretty bespoke and their block that's on there is designed just for this build. So there's nothing like off the shelf necessarily, except for like the CPU is a drop-in unit. And basically the motherboard is just a mini ITX board. This guy over here though, spec-wise, you're asking a lot for the chassis to cool this because it is a 14900K, it is a B760 motherboard, it is a 2 terabyte NVMe SSD. It's a 1000 SFX-L power supply, 80 plus gold, an RTX 4090, and all the other crap that would go in there. So it's got 64 gigs of RAM, 32 gig sticks, 2 of those. And then obviously, one of the major differences I noticed right away is you can see the back right here, there's a significant amount of open space by looking inside. This guy, you look inside, there's no void whatsoever. In fact, I can pop the top off if I wanted. There's a button here I can push, take the top fan off, then they would get no more cooling, so I'm not gonna do that. This little guy right here, this is a headphone holder. This is kind of a prototype for this. The ones that come retail are plastic, like injection molded. This one's actually 3D printed, but it just goes right here on the top, hanging off the side. The feet are really sticky, by the way, and it's actually very heavy. But you can put your headphones on there. The side filters are fabric. They are fabric, which is kind of nice for cleaning because you can vacuum it, you can just dust it out. You can use water if you want. Just make sure it's dry before you put it back on. Held on by magnets and some locator tabs on there. But that means you can see now just how big the ventilation on the side is. In fact, both sides of this are the same magnetic filters. There's that. And the other side basically just looks like more of the same. It's just a big ass vent. Let's see, the top, as you can see, is also ventilation. There is an active fan up there, but I'm not sure exactly what the layout is, so we'll check that out in a second. And then on the bottom, I'm assuming some more ventilation. Some. It's probably just for the power supply, because the power supply is on the bottom, so I'm sure that's pulling in through there. It is such a big, thick chunker. Now, looking at the layout of this board, though, I think this is an ATX motherboard in here. And the reason why I'm saying that is, look, we have our standard ATX I/O in the back, but then we have our graphics card right underneath it, right underneath that. Now, yes, ITX boards are set up that way. Looking in there, I can see our NVMe drive. I'm pretty sure this is an ATX board. Another reason why I think that is if you kind of look through with the light, you can see the back of the CPU socket that's silver right there. This whole thing appears to be the motherboard. So that means the whole motherboard actually has open ventilation on the backside, so you don't get any of that heat soak that's building up against the back walls and such. And then if you didn't notice, obviously, they have wood front panels. So this is actually designed to look really nice, even like a home theater setup. HTPC, this is obviously a very overkill HTPC, but you could put this on like a console, you know, with your TV or whatnot, and it won't look crazy. It'll look in place. It looks like a piece of furniture, and it's available in both dark wood and light wood. This is the dark wood. The light wood's more like a walnut color. It's much lighter. This is more of an oak color. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and stop this test. I'm gonna fire this one up. I'm gonna go ahead and let it, I'm gonna do like Cinebench R23 on a loop. We'll see how hot the CPU gets at its max temperature, let it cool down, and then we'll see what the max temperature gets on the GPU. And I'm gonna check the scores. I wanna see if they're in alignment with their full desktop brethren, or if by this form factor, we lose any sort of performance by just cramming it all in there, if you will. Oh, and a little spoiler alert. I've already run a lot of these tests, but we're gonna do it again for you guys on camera. Putting the filters on or taking them off had no impact on temperatures, which is very nice. This is a very breathable fabric, which means it's gonna help stop dust, but it's also not gonna stop airflow, which is important. Because I was concerned, I'm like, these look nice, but if I take them off and we see a significant change in temperature, then that's bad. But I didn't see even like 1 degree temperature change. So that's nice to see. All right, so we've been looping Port Royal now for about 1 hour and 20 minutes. It's definitely about as hot as it's gonna get. So let's talk about the temperatures right here. It might be hard to see, but our GPU's at 73C on the edge temp. Memory's at 86C, but our hotspot's at 84.5, so it's actually not terrible. Our memory did hit 100C at one point. I guess it's kind of normal. That can happen with this memory, or these GPUs, but I don't know if that block is actually touching memory, so we'll have to see what the memory cooling setup is on there. But our powers though, look at it. We're pulling 444 watts, 450 is the max stock TDP for a 4090, and I believe that might be a Founders Edition card, but we'll see when I open it up. Now, a 450 watt card being cooled in this case is a pretty significant improvement versus the older Corsair 1, because that was a 320 watt 3080. This is a 450 watt 4090, and it's the same temperature. So that shows you that obviously the extra fans and extra volume really contributed towards the cooling. Now, it does have a dedicated 240 millimeter cooler for this GPU, but a dedicated 120 millimeter AIO for the CPU. So let's go ahead now, let this cool down a little bit. I'm gonna stop the test. I wanna see how fast it cools down. Then we'll do a CPU run, and then we'll do some live gaming to see what real performance looks like in gaming. So it's 60C, 58. Yeah, it takes a little bit, 57. It takes longer for liquid to cool down than it does for anything like air, like heat pipes and stuff. So it takes a little bit longer for it to cool down. But you know what, it's just part of the experience with water cooling. It doesn't matter if it's a big system or a small system. In fact, a big water cooling loop that gets that hot takes even longer to cool down because of the massive amount of volume and thermal capacity of a larger cooling system. So this actually cools down quite a bit faster in terms of like fluid temps and stuff than say like a big system. But we're also dealing with much smaller blocks, much denser blocks, so it does take longer for that stuff to cool down back to temp. I am gonna be expecting about a 37,000 or so, but I'm a little concerned right here. Let's see what's gonna happen here. Oh, 1.192 volts, that's not bad. 1.23, okay, so 81 on the package, that's not bad at all. 240 watts on the CPU, so it's not a full 253, and it's running at 5 gigs or 4.988. So it's at 5 gig all-core, 4 gig all-core for E-core, so that's about where it should be. Yeah, 36,687. Okay, so that's pretty much like where the Intel like defaults would be for like the performance profile. So this is clearly not running the extreme profile because of the fact that extreme on a 120 AIO would be a bit much, allowing you know, that much more amps and that much more watts. But at 240, 36,687, that's actually not too bad considering the size cooler that's on there. Now what we're gonna do, we are gonna go ahead and do a 10-minute loop. It takes about 10 minutes or less actually to fill up the amount of volume of water that's in these AIOs. It doesn't take that long to get them to equilibrium. So let's go ahead and start the loop and let's see what our max temp's reaching. All right, we got 22 seconds left in our 10-minute test. Check it out, we're at 90 on the package. At some point it hit 100. These are spikes though. These are, the max can be taken with kind of a grain of salt unless we chart it out over time and show you how long we were against the max. You can see right here, we did hit the max. We're in 90s and 80s on the P cores, upper 70s and 80s on the E cores, but our power dropped down to 200 watts from 242. So clearly that's gonna be more of a long duration timer, where it's probably set to like 245 or 240 on the short duration and then 200 on the long duration, which means we lost clock speed with that too. So I'm gonna go ahead and start that one more time, just to keep it going. Our fans did ramp up. I know you can't really hear it, but I can hear it. The fans did ramp up. It's not incredibly loud, but because of the fact that there's no solid panels on there, it's all vented with just the fabric, you can hear those fans through the vent. But look, we dropped down to 4.6 gigahertz all core. Now again, we dropped down to a 32,828, and our score drop is directly linear with our voltage and our frequency. So that makes sense. It's a lot of work for a 120 millimeter AIO to have to deal with. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, they had no choice but to go 240 on the GPU because that's 450 watts, and we're talking about thermal capacity of the systems and capabilities of cooling. It would have been nice if they had really made the effort to fit a 240 in here for the GPU or the CPU as well, because, well, I don't know of many 120 watt or 120 millimeter AIOs that could actually deal with 240 watts sustained. 200 watts sustained is about the max I think we could expect a 120 AIO to really handle, and it seemed to be doing that. Which unfortunately means the CPU is being held back a little bit from what it's actually intended to be able to do, say, with a bigger cooler involved. But our package has already dropped back down to 50C. Our cores are in the 40s. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna go ahead and start up Cyberpunk, and we're just gonna sit in the city. We're just gonna sit in like downtown Night City because that's where there's a lot of AI happening. There's a lot of CPU happening for like NPC management, all the cars driving around, and then the GPU is obviously having to render all that, and then see what happens for temperatures while it's just rendering a scene consistently. Okay, so here I am in Cyberpunk 2077. We are in Ray Tracing Ultra, 4K. We do have DLSS set to quality. We also have frame gen turned on. So you can see we're getting 117 FPS in 4K, 118. CPU's at 80C, GPU's at 65C. 100% usage, 99, 100, the same thing. 2700 megahertz. So it's a little bit lower of a clock frequency even on the card. Most of the time with custom cards or third-party cards, you'll see some extra boost clock versus like a Founders Edition. This is either a Founders or a Reference. We'll see when we do the teardown. But it's holding that clock just fine. So clearly the cooling for the GPU is plenty for gaming. As you can see, I mean, everything looks pretty good to me so far. CPU's around 80, so it's kind of warm considering the CPU, even in the 70s, but it's only 25% utilized. Now it's 25% across all cores. So that means that there could be some cores that are like world threads that are much more loaded up than others. There's 84C for a second. And then 85. I mean, I'm not feeling any stuttering. Our FPS is really consistent. That's why I have the graph on, so you can see the chart of FPS. It's very, very smooth line there. You know what? Oh, he said, why did you do that? Okay, well. Okay, so I finally died. But anyway, the temperatures are actually fine. Look at the frame rate. Well, now that we're in this, but it's actually very, very consistent. So not feeling like throttling under gaming is really an issue. Cinebench definitely, because of the fact that that's such a hard test to run. AVX instruction set intended to push the CPU cores to 100% usage. I'm gonna let it cool down a little bit. I wanna open it up. I wanna see what the inside looks like. Actually, before the teardown, I want to show you the software. So this is the Corsair 1 dashboard. It's just kind of funny because it hasn't been renamed or anything. Let's see, i500 now. But anyway, so things that you can see in here: GPU coolant temp, CPU coolant temp. These are coolant temps, not component temps. It's important to note. You can see the speed of the AIO pumps, and you can also see the fan RPMs. You cannot change the RPMs in this software, which I think is kind of weird. I wish I'd like to have fan curves available. I'd much rather have the fans going Mach 10 and keep things as cool as possible, because noise is not that important to me. I have a loud household. I have kids that are loud. TVs are always on. I've got air conditioner vents and stuff that are always going. So the ultra quiet is not that important to me. So I would err on the side of noise for better performance. But there's no profiles or anything you can choose from right here. The only thing you can manipulate here is the RGB settings right here, and there's on the other side as well, and it's on the front, and the button will also match. This is the power button right there. So there's also this RGB effect, which is Starry Night. So this, as you can see, does like the starry blinking light. I wish I could modify that, because I'd rather have it blink a couple of maybe blue colors, not RGB. So again, kind of weak there. We have color cycle. That's just the color wheel, the RGB wheel, which in this case isn't even a wheel, it's just going through the full color. If we do the rainbow, I think it's just the color. Yeah, that's rainbow is the full like color wheel. Strobing is just changes color, like very boring. And then we have static, which is how I had it set up with white. So I wanted to point that out. Then over here, this is the Corsair Diagnostics, which I've never used before. Maybe I'll do a separate kind of checkup on this, but it looks like we're able to check various things. This is giving us our actual temperatures here. So now we can see CPU load and temp. CPU's up 32, 29, 31. Which temp sensor that is reporting, I'm not entirely sure. As you can see right here, the RTX 4090 is showing 34 degrees. It's GPU 2, because it is a 14900K, which means there is an internal GPU on the CPU. So that's GPU 1 as reporting by this utility. But then it also has like interactive tests, rapid stress test checkups, analysis, and all that stuff that probably comes in handy if you ever needed support from Corsair. They'll probably have you run these tests and it gives them some stuff. But I've never seen this utility before. It's the first time I've seen it. I do feel like the software supporting this is a little weak. I only say that because I can't control fan curves. There's no customization or profiles to save there. And the RGB lighting from a company that's developed some pretty nice lighting effects from IQ, not incorporating that into here, to me, unfortunately, is a weak point. So anyway, now that it's cooled off plenty, let's go. Oh, one other thing I want to show you too on the back here, there's this little panel right here. If I touch it, it turns on a little light. So that's just to make it easier in the dark to plug in your components and stuff behind the system. It's just a little touch panel right there. All right, so in terms of teardown, there's a Phillips head there and there on both sides, and little ball nubbins. It just hooks on the bottom. We have a rubber padding right there, which is probably nice to keep from any sort of vibrations going. Here's those magnets for the filters. Okay, so first thing you can see right here, we have this looks like it's gonna be a micro ATX board maybe. I do wonder now if it is mini ITX and I'm just stupid. But I do see hole provisions for what look like would be ATX. Anyway, so we can see we have our fan cables right there. We've got some braided cables for our EPS power down to the power supply down here. We even have a spot right here if we wanted to add like a SATA drive. And look, there's already a power plug ready to go right here. What about a SATA cable? Oh yeah, there it is right there. So it is pre-wired and configured for a SATA drive if we wanted. This is tapped down right there. But if we wanted to add another drive to this, just not using NVMe, we can do that, which is nice to see that that's pre-wired and ready to go. On the other side, we're finally gonna see what's in here. Fans. There they are, fans. So they're thin fans, actually. I'm surprised about it. These are like 15 mil fans. I thought they would have been like thicker fans, but okay. So these are the 5 fans. We have 2 on the top exhausting. We have 3 right here on the intakes. So these are clearly gonna be, so this is gonna be our AIO right here, at least one of them. That looks like this might be our CPU AIO. This is just cool air going right into the chassis. This one, as you can see right behind it, has the fins for the AIO. This one on the bottom also appears to just be bringing air into the bottom side of the compartment. So there's our AIO for the CPU right there. You know what? I'm a little disappointed. I feel like we could have put a push-pull on this, which would have helped some. Because it's a 15 mil fan, probably even thinner than that actually. Yeah, I feel like a push-pull on that would have been nice. I could still even put a fat 120 on there if I wanted to help. Man, I now wonder if that would have been beneficial. This does appear to be at very bare minimum a micro ATX board. Appears to be a pretty standard off-the-shelf type of AIO as well. Looks like it might be a Corsair Link product because as you can see, it's using the USB-C plug on the side of the AIO. So it looks like they might be using a Corsair Link. You know, that also doesn't even make sense to me because we have plenty of room. There's plenty of void in here, which means they could have used a full depth 25 millimeter fan and had better static pressure pushing through this. So to me, this is and we have a full size 120 right here. So I don't know why they went with slim because there's plenty of room. So the 240 is up here on the top and the tubing runs down to the bottom down here. And then on the underside right here is the GPU. And I like how it's just resting on that fan. The GPU pump is on the other side of that. Okay, so here is our bottom fan. Again, I fully feel like we could have fit. I mean, look how much empty space is behind here, right? I still feel like we could have fit a non-slim fan in there, personally. It is a micro ATX board. You can see that we do have an AIO with a cold plate that is actually touching the RAM, but it's because the water doesn't flow directly above it, it's just whatever heat radiates or conducts through that cold plate to the center is what's being cooled. So that's why the VRAM was not the coldest we've seen, but at least it's being touched. Unlike the VRMs, there's no cooling at all on the VRMs, which is, I think, fine, honestly. This fan airflow down here is intended to blow some air with those components and it would be just fine. But I feel like I need to do a video in the future. In fact, hit like on this video if you guys want me to. Oh, it's a mortar, by the way. It's a mortar motherboard. Hit like if you guys would like me to do some modifications to this with better fans to see what happens to the cooling. And I also want to point something out. If you look down there underneath the pump for the GPU, you can see our exposed non-heat sinked NVMe drive. So it's not in the upper compartment underneath the NVMe heatsink little cover thing. It's actually just exposed right there. So I still think it'd be fine though, because it does have airflow going over it because of that fan. It's just interesting to me that they didn't put it in the spot that would be in the most prioritized NVMe slot in terms of the lanes to the CPU. So it is farther down, which I think is odd. Other than that, it's really just off-the-shelf parts, which is different than the original Corsair ones because other than the CPU itself and the motherboard, like the GPU and the coolers and all that sort of stuff were 100% like customized for that. So this is much more off-the-shelf type of parts and friendly. So there's nothing else past that to really tear down. I like the fact that this is much more user-friendly to access. Even if you just wanted to add more storage to your other, like the Corsair one, it was a lot of work because you had to get all the way down to the motherboard, which was completely like clamshelled and buried by the customness of the tiny case. And then I want to point out too, you can actually add 2 more drives to this because we do have another NVMe slot. That top one is not being utilized, and we have that SATA slot. So we can add 2 more drives to this if we want. Now, one thing I want to point out about these fans is they did make a little bit, one of these made a little bit of a, do you hear that sound? Now all of them do that, but because they were spinning at such low RPM, one of these bearings was making a slight rattly sound at like its idle RPM, like where the system's not under load. It was a little bit annoying. The only reason I think I noticed it though is because this room is very quiet. We built this room for filming, so it's pretty quiet in here. But in my home, I don't think I would have noticed that, but it was. It's just what happens with some fans when they're horizontal. All right, well, there you go. It's not cheap. It comes in at a whopping, this config, because there are some small things you can config, comes in at a whopping $4,699. That is a lot of money. Little things I think need to be improved though. There could be better fans in this. I don't understand the choice for slim fans up here where it mattered. I don't understand the choice of 120 AIO for the 14900K, which we know needs more than that. But you know, I have to assume people are buying them, or they wouldn't keep making them, because they're not far off from the price that they were back when they were the tiny little Corsair ones, which were definitely throttling and doing crazy things when it comes to temperatures. So you can change the config a little bit though. This is the highest config with the 4090 and the 2TB NVMe. You can get it with the 4080 Super. They all have i9s in them. There's no i7 version, which I think is kind of, hopefully they come out with one in the future that's a little bit more like i5, i7 spec, and even with like a 4070 or something in here, because those components would be great in here because they're a lot less heat generating. Even though I think the temperatures were fine, they were kept within spec, although in Cinebench we did drop some clocks and stuff. That's normal for that kind of test in this kind of chassis. But yeah, it's expensive. So this is where I want you guys to sound off. Like, is this something that would even be remotely interesting to you? Or is it just such a high-end boutique item that it's completely out of your price budget? So I'm just kind of curious about that. Anyway, once again, a huge thanks to Corsair for sending us this to take a look at. We've been fans of the Corsair ones in the past. You saw the Star Wars build that I did with it, where I customized the case and made it have blaster damage and weathered and all that sort of stuff. And then the next one, the Corsair 2, which is still Corsair 1, always ran a bit warm because there was much more heat in a much tighter package, and then obviously they had to expand it. So there you go. All right, guys, I'll put a link down in the description below. You guys can go and check it out. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.